This is another Mr. Garage do-it-yourself video. Behind me, I have one of the most loved and hated generators on the planet. And why I say that is everybody that paid a whole lot more for a different brand of generator hates it because they want to justify their purchase. Everybody that's bought one, or a majority of people that buy them, love them. This is the Harbor Freight Predator 3500 watt inverter generator. We're going to get into maintenance and general recommendations for this gen if you want to have a very, very long life. That generator back there, I got about 200 hours on it. That's no record by any means. There's Hondas in the thousands, but this thing gets used infrequently, but it just works. Powers our travel trailer, powers our air conditioning, powers really whatever we want to do. It has been an excellent generator. So yeah, let's get into the maintenance. The very first thing I'm going to recommend for this generator is get a battery tender on it. This is a sealed lead acid battery for the starter. It does have a manual pull start on the generator, but a sealed lead acid battery, if you let it sit for a month or two or 3 or 4, whatever it may be, is going to go dead from parasitic loss or just time, and the battery's going to have a really short life. So buy one of these battery tender 800 models, and this goes for any generator really with an electric start. Buy a battery tender. The 800 model comes with a nice little SAE connector and some cables. Hook it up to your gen, and any time that it's not being used or it's just sitting in the garage, hook up your battery tender and just let it maintain the battery. This battery is pushing, I think it's about just over 2 years old now. No issues, starts up like a champ. So yeah, definitely get a battery tender for this generator. Once you have your battery tender cable installed, what I do, and what I did, is I cut just a really small notch out of the door assembly. Very small, not going to void your warranty or anything for a notch in a door. Don't be silly. Anyways, I run the SAE connector right outside here. So it just kind of sits there, and it works. So anytime I bring it in, I just pop off the cap on this SAE and plug in the battery tender. That's all there is to it. Maintains the battery. You're going to get probably 3-4 times the life out of your battery if you keep it maintained. Next up is, if you want to stay legal, you need to have your spark arrestor installed and in good shape on your generator. These can get soot in them, they kind of clog up and they become a mess, and they're really easy to maintain. And again, you don't want to be the guy or family that starts a forest fire running your generator because some spark came out of the exhaust and lit everything on fire. That's no good for anybody. So all we have to do to get to the spark arrestor is we have 6 Phillips screws. And we're going to take that out, and this whole panel comes off, and we have 2 8mm bolts. We're going to pull off the cover, and I'll show you what the spark arrestor looks like. Just taking off the last bolt out of the spark arrestor. And this is the wire mesh that is the spark arrestor on the end of it. This one I cleaned before I put away last time, so I'm not even going to pretend it just came out like that, because it usually is black, sooty, and very ugly, because these generators do run a bit rich. Now inside the exhaust we have a screen. Again, I cleaned this one. This would usually be a black mess where you wouldn't be able to see the red of the generator behind it. So these are the parts you need to clean. Now what I do to clean them is I have a gallon of Berryman carb cleaner. It's basically called Chem Dip, and I just dip, if that'll ever focus, I just dip it in Chem Dip and let it sit for a couple hours, and that usually takes care of most of it. Then I take a little toothbrush and just kind of scrub it off and reinstall it. But that keeps your spark arrestor up clean and keeps it from clogging up the exhaust. If you get a clogged exhaust, then your engine can overheat, and it's just not a good thing. So keep the spark arrestor clean. That's all I'm trying to get across. That's a good maintenance tip for you. A lot of people just never touch the spark arrestor. They leave it in there forever and then wonder why their generator fails prematurely after it's been running for hundreds and hundreds of hours. So one of the super common mods, and one of the well-known things on this version of generator and all the different variants of it, is the cases are sealed extremely well. Now, you'll notice I got a bunch of holes right here. Those didn't come from the factory. So these little cast-in recesses or molded-in recesses, all I do is drill a hole in these, common mod, and remove the foam behind them. So that way the generator and the carb can breathe a little better. Helps with high altitude starting, things like that, where air is kind of really needed. But anyways, yeah, that's one modification that I do recommend. And we'll move on to oil change. Okay, so jumping right into the oil change, all we have to do is take this little door off. This is actually a very easy oil change to do. So take that off. Now down inside here, your oil drain plug, you can see it right there. Now there's a little spout that kind of lets it drip straight down. So we got a little pop-out plug that I just knocked down. That's your pop-out plug. Now if you notice, and we're wondering why earlier, why does this guy have this on jack stands? Well, this is the easiest way for me to do an oil change on this. Doesn't strain my back. I just throw it on, well, not jack stands, but car ramps. And I just use this little plastic container that I've got. I place it directly under the hole, and I pull the little 10mm bolt out, and my oil runs right into my little pan. So it's a super quick and clean way to drain your oil. Now I recommend when you do an oil change on this generator, let it fully warm up, get it nice and toasty, shut it off for just a few minutes, and then go ahead and pull the drain plug. So the reason why I recommend that is hot oil is a lot more fluid-like, so it's gonna come kind of rushing out much more quickly than it normally would, and it's going to take any particulates or anything with it that are sitting in the bottom of the pan. So yeah, we'll get on that and let's get our oil change done. All right, so our oil's draining. You can see it running down the little spout right out the hole in the bottom, just like I said. And oil actually looks really good. I don't have a lot of hours on it, maybe 20 hours, but it's looking really good. And we got a little container below, and we can see oil running right down into the container. So we're gonna let that drain, and then I'm gonna show you and tell you about the dipstick that I have that's a little different than a factory dipstick. Another good modification for small engines, any small engine really, that does not have an oil filter. So we will talk about that in just a second. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about our dipstick. So this is a little aluminum magnetic dipstick that you can just buy online for generators and other small engines. This one's for the Predator series generator. But as you can see, I've got some black smudge kind of on the tip of this. Now this is just kind of wear and tear over time from metal parts or steel parts that are in the engine. And they shed off, and they usually end up just floating around in the oil. It can reduce engine life. So this is one of those things where if you're kind of obsessive about engines, you do something like this just to prevent any of that from recirculating through the oil. Now I don't have much because I've run this for so long, so it's just got a tiny bit on the tip. So we're gonna wipe that off, make sure that that's nice and clean. You can see the little black filings that came off right there, or just little tiny pieces of metal. They're so fine and so small that it just turns out black, but that's what you're going for, and that's why I recommend one of these little magnetic dipsticks. Okay, so we're going to add oil back to this engine. I'm going to show you about the easiest, cleanest way that I know how to do this. Now this is the oil that I use for my generators and other power sports stuff, 15W40 Rotella. Use whatever you want. Good oil and the right weight is better than not doing your maintenance. So just make sure you do your maintenance on time and make sure you continually maintain it. And I don't care what oil you run, it's going to work, but this is just my choice. So what I do is I've got this syringe from Mighty Vac. Now I've bought some knockoffs of this on eBay that had gray colored seals. These are kind of red, and the gray seals swell up and they get stuck inside the chamber, and they're kind of garbage. So this Mighty Vac one I've had for a while now. Fluid Extractor is what it goes by. That's the model number and all that stuff. This thing is awesome for doing clean oil changes on small engines because I've got to be able to get oil all the way up inside there. So what I do, that will behave. We just simply put this down in our oil like that, and we draw oil right up inside. All right, so we're gonna let the ink kind of drip out a little bit. Let's get our paper towel kind of under here. There we go, good shape there. Except you guys can't see. We're gonna put it right up in the dipstick hole, and we're gonna push it into the engine. Now what I do on my particular generator, I just fill it till it runs out the dipstick hole, and to me that's full. Oil is really thick, especially when it's cold out, so it's kind of hard to pull up in this syringe. There we go. And we'll let it drip out for a second. Slip it right up in there. Now I got a little bit dripping down. I can't remember if we're full or not. I can't remember if it's 400 cc's or how much it is. So we'll add a little bit more. It's a small mess, whatever. And that's it. Notice I did take the generator off jack stands. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. So we don't want it on jack stands while we do this. But yeah, looks like our oil is full. We're going to put our dipstick back in. I'll just stick a paper towel in there and wipe up the few little drips that I had. But overall, that's about as clean as it's going to get. You're going to drip some oil in any oil change, but that is clean and easy to do. So I definitely recommend one of these little pumps. This works great for air compressors or other small engines. All right, we're going to be pulling the side cover. We just have these 2 Phillips screws on there, and we got to kind of lift this rubber tab. And we're going to be getting to the air filter and kind of the internals. I'll show you just one other little detail of maintenance you need to do to your generator. Okay, so we pulled the side cover off, and I'm going to get down and kind of show you how to get your air filter in this. Don't need to do this too often unless you're in a really dusty environment. So as I lay on the ground, sacrificing my clothes for you guys, you got a latch here now that the camera's focused, and we flip this latch. That pops the door down and sit back up. And that lets us get to our air filter. So we got to kind of finagle the cover off, doing this all one-handed. You got a little block of foam in here that's been oiled, and we can pull it out. So that's our air filter. Notice the notch goes kind of up on that side. That's the intake side. So it's kind of gross, but that's the intake side and the output side. So we're going to go wash this out really, really well, and then just kind of re-oil it. What I use for air filters like this, I use just a tiny bit of gear oil. So I'll be soaking it in a little bit of 75-90 and making sure it's all wrung out, and just make sure it has some oil on it, and that's going to be the filtration for this motor. All right, we're going to show you how to change out the spark plug on this motor. Now, this motor's stock spark plug is the lowest of the low quality. Get rid of it, get a good iridium plug, and your starts are going to be a lot faster. The plug's never going to foul, and it's probably going to last the life of the generator. These things last forever. So what we do, we got to break the plug wire loose. So what I use is I've got a pair of hose pliers. They're kind of rounded at the tip like this. We're going to grab onto just the boot delicately, and we're going to kind of twist to break it loose. And we're going to kind of move it back and forth, lift away from the engine, and that's it. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take the plug wire, move it aside, and we're going to take out this rubber boot. Okay, so when we reassemble all this stuff, we are going to have to grease up this rubber boot, and we're going to grease up with dielectric grease the outside of this spark plug wire, and we're also going to grease up the end of this plug. Now, the socket itself, 13/16, that's what we want to use. And the opening for this is very small. So we have to kind of wiggle this down in here, get it onto the plug, and we'll take our plug out. Now, I've already done this change. I already had an iridium in it almost since new, just because I know spark plugs, I know engines. I just didn't even bother with the factory plug. But we'll take it out. See if we're out yet. There we go. And this is our plug. Now, what we're going to notice from this plug reading it is this motor, as we all know, is running very rich. A lot of guys online rejet it a little bit, but it's running rich even for our altitude, so it's pretty black. But I went to iridium for this reason. You almost can't foul iridium to the point it can't spark. The fine wire electrode shoots a little spark straight across the gap, so tight, so focused that it won't foul out. So that's why you probably want one of these. Now, that's pretty much it. We're going to take our dielectric grease. We're going to kind of grease up around the connector on this guy, which was loose. Tighten this connector down, this little end cap piece. We're going to grease up our plug wire, and we're going to grease up our boot, reassemble. And again, that's what I recommend. The part number is going to be a BPR EIX, if you can read that. So that's the plug I recommend for this if you don't want it to foul. We could even go to one heat range hotter if they make it in this, a BPR 6 EIX, if they make it. And yeah, that's it for spark plugs. Okay, so quick tip on the spark plug. When you put it and you reinstall your spark plug, you're going to get it as tight as you can by hand. Most all 13/16 sockets are really too big for the hole that they have here. So, I mean, it's super, super, super tight. So we're going to put it in our socket. Now, when you do it, these spark plugs are gasketed, so they have a crush gasket on them. So what we're going to do is we would turn it half a turn. Now, this is a used plug, so the gasket's already tight, so I already cranked it about 1/8 of a turn. But what we would do is a half turn to 2/3 to crush the gasket properly. So a half would be, if we're at this angle, would be right there. Now, if I wanted to go 2/3, put a little more gur on it, I may go to there. Obviously, clockwise, we go the other way, tightening it. But that's what we do to tighten it. Now, once you're done and you've got it torqued, your socket's probably going to stick in there. Most all 13/16 will. So you're going to have to use some pliers. Grab onto it and pull hard to get it out. There we go. So our plug's installed. I've already greased up, so I put dielectric grease. You can see it's kind of a bluish transparent color there. I put dielectric grease inside the boot, outside the boot, inside the boot, all over the place. And so we're going to reinsert this guy. Make sure it clicks. I felt a little click. Our boot's all the way down, the spark boot. And that is it. We're done. Now we're going to make sure that we didn't break a plug wire. Going to make sure we didn't do anything wrong. We got our air filter cleaned up. We got our spark plug installed. We did our oil change. And now we're going to do what everybody likes to see, is just an engine start. These are pretty easy. I did warm it up a while ago. But grab the camera out. All right, so when we start one of these engines, we have a couple of selectors here. We have ESC throttle. We want that off, which is this electronic throttle control that idles it down, or will auto idle it up when it has a load. And we can set it to run, or we can set it to start. Now, what I found on starting this generator is when I'm at lower altitude, under 3,000 feet or so, I usually will use it on the start function to start it. When I'm at high altitude, because it runs so rich, I just set it straight to run, and it'll start up a lot better on run at high altitude, usually 4,000 to 7,000 feet. So we're just going to put it on start here, ESC off, and we're going to bump our starter. Okay, then we'll turn it to run. All right, now that it's idling smooth, we're going to hit our ESC. That's going to idle it down. And yeah, that's it. That's everything I was here to show you guys, and I appreciate if you guys like what I do. Subscribe and keep watching my videos. I just do all kinds of random stuff all the time. That's just what happens in my life. Talk to you soon. Now that the generator's put away, sleeping, it's got its battery tender plugged in, and it's ready for another few month nap until we get to the heat here in Arizona in the summertime when we use AC on our travel trailer. I forgot to mention one of the most important maintenance things. Don't know how I forgot this. But the fuel. When your generators sit, if you're letting your generator sit for a couple weeks at a time, months at a time, whatever it is, you have got to use fuel stabilizer. I can't count the hours of my life that have been spent cleaning carburetors and refurbishing carburetors. Use Stabil or some type of a fuel stabilizer. I usually put about 1 ounce to 2 ounces in this little tiny tank. That's all that's needed. Put it in there. Run the engine for probably 5 minutes or so. Make sure that stabilizer is in the carb before you put it away, and that's going to ensure that next time when you fire up this generator or haul it out, that it is going to start and that fuel is still going to be good. Now, even better yet, if you have portable gas containers, like if you have a couple 5-gallon cans that you take all over the place, put stabilizer in all of your cans. So anything that you fill up already has fuel stabilizer in it. You don't have to worry about it. Everything's ready to go. All right, that's all I got. I will shut up now. You guys have a good one.